I'm Rick Connor, and I'm editor-in-chief of the World Water Development Report. So I'll share my screen, and I'll give you maybe roughly 10 minutes of highlights. And so here we go. Uh, the 2023 edition of the report describes how building partnerships and enhancing cooperation are essential to realizing the human rights to water and sanitation and all of the targets of Sustainable Development Goal 6, the goal for water. Uh, Global water use has been increasing by roughly 1% for the last 30 years, and we should expect it to increase by about 1% per year over the same period, so over the next 30 years. Now, this growth in demand is not worldwide. It's very much concentrated in emerging economies and developing countries. And it's this growth there is primarily driven by industrial development and increasing demands for water and sanitation services especially in rapidly expanding cities, because that's where you have true population growth. 10% of the global population lives in countries with high or critical water stress, but up to 3.5 billion people live under conditions of water stress for at least 1 month a year. And I've added this on this slide. This is from the IPCC that came out a day or two ago that that are supporting this without going 1 month at a time, but they say that roughly half the world's population experiences water scarcity for at least part of the year, right? Um, and as a result of climate change, seasonal water scarcity will increase. And this will be both in regions where water is currently abundant, and it's going to worsen in regions where water is already in short supply, such as the Middle East and the Sahel in Africa. Nearly all countries show risks related to water quality. Pollution in low-income countries is most often related with low levels of wastewater treatment. 80% of the world's wastewater is released to the environment without any treatment. And in developing countries, it's as high as 99%. So pretty much the totality. But in higher income countries, it's agricultural runoff that is the most serious problem. So at the UN conference here, it focuses on accelerating progress towards sanitation and water-related goals. And so here are the 11 targets. Now, it's well known the big figures that 2 billion people do not have access to safe water supply, and 3.6 billion lack access to safely managed sanitation. Now, well, the fact is, though, that all of these targets are off track. So partnerships and cooperation, well, they take place in almost every water-related endeavor. Most water partnerships and human settlements focus on supply and sanitation. And our report shows that effective stakeholder involvement leads to services that are more appropriate to the needs and resources of poor communities. And it also, this participatory approach increases public acceptance and ownership of the systems. In rural and peri-urban areas, uh, things like water user associations allow smallholder farmers to improve the performance of shared irrigation schemes. So rather than getting what you can when they can't afford their own irrigation scheme, they pool their resources and in partnership, develop a more of a regional or a local irrigation scheme where they share the costs and the benefits. Now, urban water demand is projected to increase by 80% in 2050. And the global urban population facing water scarcity is projected to double from about 1 billion to somewhere around 2 billion people over the same period. So cooperation between cities and the agricultural communities that surround them will be absolutely essential to meeting the water needs of both. And this cooperation involves a combination of market, administrative, and especially participatory mechanisms. By investing in the agricultural communities upstream, municipalities benefit from the additional water released by the farmers, and the farmers can afford measures that increase their irrigation efficiency. Partnerships focused on watershed protection. Somebody's asking me about getting into the lobby. Okay, I'll just ignore that. So partnerships focused on watershed protection or rehabilitation have been increasing worldwide. Something called water funds are financing schemes that bring together downstream users like cities, businesses, and utilities to collectively invest in upstream habitat protection and agricultural land management to improve water availability and water quality, which in turn reduces the costs of treatment by the users downstream. So you can see it as replacing the cost of high levels of treatment with for the same price. What you do is you protect the water in the uplands, and so it's a zero sum in terms of financial investment. You don't need to invest more. You need to basically invest better. And this includes investments in nature-based solutions. So moving away from gray man-built infrastructure, which really dominates water management, and working a little bit more with nature. This is also from the IPCC from yesterday. You see, greater cooperation is needed between the water and climate communities. And because when we talk about climate change, the number one impact, or the main way that climate change will impact on humans and societies, is through water. So a lot of adaptation measures to climate change are water related. You can see some here. But what's been missing is the mitigation measures, the way that you can enhance water management and at the same time reduce greenhouse gases. Now, this in and of itself is a good idea, but the bottom line is that climate funds are mainly earmarked for mitigation. And so since water has always fallen in the realm of adaptation, it hasn't really been able to access a lot of the funding from the climate funds. Now, there's a lot of ways that water management can actually contribute to mitigation. One example is biogas recovery from wastewater treatment systems. And another is wetland protection. As I said earlier, protecting wetlands in the upstream, it helps flood control. Wetlands act as a sponge, so they store more water. But they also, wetlands capture carbon. So they capture atmospheric carbon, and that's where they also serve as mitigation measures. And wetlands also clean water. They reduce water pollution. They increase water quality. So protecting wetlands is a triple win, and it is available. This type of approach should be available, or funding through climate funds should be available to this type of approach. So in the context of partnerships and cooperation, our report identifies this sort of need for greater cooperation between the water and the climate communities, and especially from the water community to recognize and to sell the idea of what we can do in terms of mitigation to the climate community to access this climate funding. Of course, cooperation is particularly critical for ensuring water security in transboundary basins. Uh, the vast majority of the world's internationally shared aquifers, the shared groundwater, do not have formal cooperative agreements. So there's, again, room to improve cooperation on transboundary waters, especially with respect to groundwater. So while the report makes a solid case for the need for cooperation and partnerships for water, we also highlight a number of additional opportunities that should motivate partners to engage in more collaborative approaches. For example, the report shows how involving a diversity of partners expands co-benefits and improves performance. Environmental co-benefits, such as biodiversity, flood and pollution control, are among the most often highlighted in the report, along with well, reliable data and information strengthen partnerships and vice versa. Partnerships facilitate and enhance data gathering through things like joint monitoring. And this generation of information benefits all parties, provided that there's an open and transparent exchange of this data. And when this happens, it's integral to effective cooperation, and it builds trust among partners. Partnerships can foster innovation. During the COVID-19 epidemic, partnerships between health authorities and municipal wastewater laboratories were able to track the disease, providing unprecedented georeference outbreak information in real time. And the estimated cost of meeting SDG 6 targets is somewhere between 600 billion and 1 trillion per year. This is a rough estimate, but it does give you an order of magnitude. Now, partnerships create opportunities to pool often limited resources. I was talking about the climate funds earlier, for instance, and also share risks. And so it improves the business case for investors and financiers. On the donor side or the investor side, financiers themselves can benefit from cooperation through co-financing agreements. And again, it has to do with also risk sharing. And most donors or financiers would much prefer to be not the only financier, but to be one of several, so a consortium, again, hedging risks and not going at it alone in terms of risks. And ladies and gentlemen, my time is up, and I thank you for your kind attention.